In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. Tonight, we have a great episode of Final Word Friday. Before the guests get the opportunity to introduce themselves, I'd like to open the show with a tribute to Black History Reflection, but also on women's history with Fannie Lou Hamer, and then I would start with an opening monologue. Fannie Lou Hamer once said, "Nobody's free until everybody's free." And tonight, as we gather for Final Word Friday, her words echo louder than ever. Hamer was a sharecropper turned freedom fighter, a woman who refused to be silent in a world determined to silence her. After beaten, jailed, and threatened for simply trying to register to vote, she stood before the nation in 1964 Democratic National Convention and told the truth about America's broken promises. Her courage forced the country to confront the violence of voter suppression and the cost of freedom. She taught us that democracy is not a spectator sport, it is a struggle, a calling, a responsibility. As we discuss war, education, voting rights, and the silencing of voters in Texas, we honor Fannie Lou Hamer's legacy, a legacy built on truth telling, sacrifice, and the unshakable belief that ordinary people can change the world. Her fight is not history, her fight is now. And tonight, we carry her spirit into this convention. So, as I get into my opening monologue, I want to tell you all that I want to welcome you to Final Word Friday, where truth meets accountability and where the conversations we have are the conversations America needs. This week has been heavy. We're watching a war unfold overseas, political battles erupt at home, and systems that shape our lives being tested in real time. But here's the thing, moments like this demand clarity, they demand courage, and they demand community. Tonight, we're bringing all of that to the table. We're talking about the Iran war, not just the headlines, but the human cost and the leadership questions we cannot ignore. We're talking about education, the foundation of opportunity, equity, and the future of our children deserve. And we're talking about voting rights, the heartbeat of democracy, and the Texas race where voters were silenced and democracy was denied. This is not just news, this is our lives, our communities, our future. So let's get into it and let's tell the truth and let's make sure the final word tonight is one that moves us forward. Let me bring on the guests and have the guests introduce themselves to you all. Hello, Jordan, and hello, David. Jordan, could you first start off first and introduce yourself to the show?
Sure. My name is Jordan Costin. I carry a few titles. So, my most prominent one that I do on a fairly regular basis, daily, I should say, is I am a psychotherapist or a therapist. So, I have that. I am founder of a nonprofit, Safe Space Nova, provides positive programming for LGBTQ youth in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And lastly, I am a podcast host on a podcast called The Queer and Kinky Couch.
And David, could you introduce yourself, please? David? David?
Good evening. I'm David Marshall, and I guess I might have a few titles too. I don't know if there's quite as fancy as Jordan's, but I am a certified professional life coach, as well as founder and CEO of Journey to Josiah Incorporated, and founder of the Purpose Room Life Coaching LLC. And I've recently published a journal called Getting to Happy, a journal of purpose and joy.
I'll tell you guys, we were supposed to have a third guest that apparently maybe he's had some problems joining the show. But again, Jordan, this is your first time on Final Word Friday. David has been here before, and this is basically where we get to just discuss and talk about things that are affecting not just our communities, but the world. But we also would like to have our opinions as to what we can do to make these things a whole lot better. The first thing I'd like to throw out to you guys is the Iran war. And if you guys can tell me, what are your thoughts on this and what are your feelings as to the not just the escalation, but what the fallback could be when it comes to this?
Well, just starting off, this is a president whose platform was based off of we don't need to be policing the world. So the issue, as I see it, central to the rhetoric is what was espoused as part of the campaign and the political sphere for this administration is not, we're not seeing that in real time just based off this most recent war. The casualties that come with this type of war, I mean, we're talking about Iran here. And there's so much that can be attributed to this moment of this is an unnecessary war that we did not have to be in, just given what we're dealing with on the home front. So that's just my initial opinion.
David?
Well, first let me say, I think I might be on somewhat of a delay, so please pardon me if I'm a little delayed in responding. My thoughts are why. I don't think it's a too complicated of a thing. I do not understand at all what we are doing there. We have a president or something to that effect that stated that there wouldn't be any more wars. As a matter of fact, did he not swindle somebody into loaning him their Nobel Peace Prize? But then there's no peace. I don't know why, the old people would say you have to sweep around your own front door. Well, our front door is very, very dusty. And there's no one sweeping around it. I think that the lives lost, because we're talking about civilian lives. When they go in and they invade these places, they're not invading military areas. They're invading civilian places. So that means that there are innocent individuals killed. I think that there was a school that was bombed, if I'm not mistaken, during doing this. So I'm lost. What is the actual outcome of this supposed to be? Because again, if we are leaning into this president, then you can be assured that there's something there that must be material for him, because it has nothing to do with making lives better.
Well, before I get into this, I want to say something too. But we have a few comments already here in the chat. Felix, I'll put this on the screen. He says he finally made it. That is to see the show, and he says hello, guys. And he also has a comment where he says this is a distraction for something he's cooking up big. Now, for me, what it did for me is I actually was more than just not happy about this, but of course there's nothing I can do as being a lay person, but being a veteran, what it said to me is that anyone that's a veteran knows that this is not what we need to be doing. And it instantaneously made me think of 9/11. because when they went over there into Iraq and stirred up that bee's nest, they got some repercussions. Well, we suffered some repercussions that was unthinkable after that. And so my thing is, this may, as much as they're publicizing and putting all of this reign of terror that America is succeeding after following the lead of Israel. Israel is the reason for this is happening. And so, because these folk came from Germany, Europe, and stole land from the Palestinians with the help of America to take these people's land, push them away, trying to totally destroy it and occupy this land. I don't understand what that's about. Because if you're trying to do what America did when they actually came here to steal this land, people from Europe, it's like it's the same thing over again that's actually going to be backlash, I think, on us, the American people, because there's going to be plenty of repercussions to come from this. I hate to see people losing lives, for one thing, but to rain terror on the city where people are just carrying forth with their everyday life, and to say that you're over here to be Captain Save-A-Hole, you can't be if you can't save America.
I mean, this is.
Because it really does not make sense. And I think those that are actually supporting this, it makes it even worse because, of course, I'll say this boldly, that there's no person that looks like you and I will be supporting that, because we know that there's repercussions behind that. And just think about this bill that they just brought to the floor, where supposedly they were going to put a strain, on what's happening with this war. Apparently that bill failed, so he can still run free. And then they just put up a bill yesterday in the House to allow him to run for a third term. What crap is that?
I mean, it's really just more of the same of what we've seen. So, as somebody who has been in the Washington, D.C. area, since 2003, so came here for college, been here for decades at this point, and now as a therapist with over, 6 years under my belt, working with clients. So, he's worried about Iran, what's going on over there. He's trying to take people out, take out this regime, so to speak. But what I'm seeing day to day when it comes to the client base are the multiple casualties in relation to the people that he let go, the thousands, right? So their mental state and where they are in a destitute place, a lot of these people, and that's what I'm dealing with right now. So while he and this administration, a majority of them are so focused on this international war and what that means and looks like, and again, policing the world, what about the people here at home? What about the people who actually worked in this government, who thought a year plus ago that they were in a safe and secure place, and they're not? I'm talking people who worked in the government half for years, who are now just trying to make ends meet, essentially. Right? We are dealing with so much fallout just in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area alone. It's almost difficult for me to even hear about some international war just based off of what I'm seeing on the ground as a therapist, trying to help people get to a better place. The mental fallout from just being let go from this administration, some of the other things that have happened. My degree, and along with so many other master's degrees, have now been listed as non-professional, so we can no longer get the funding that we need to pursue education. We need social workers, we need nurses. But guess what? This administration said, I want to downgrade what these master's degrees and these forms of education are for female-dominated fields, essentially. To say, like, you know what, you're not going to be able to get the money you need. We're not going to be able to increase the numbers. And that's what's happening on the front lines of the homeland in our domestic area. So the fact that we're just so focused on this Iran war and what's going on over there and not fixing what's happening here is just ultimately disturbing for somebody like me, the work that I do on a daily basis.
And I would have to say that I echo Felix in the distraction, because as we have these catastrophic things happening in Iran, we have catastrophes that are coming out in a file, where we have multiple people of a high income who have committed horrendous crimes, or allegedly committed horrendous crimes towards girls and women. And then on top of that, we have a president who has also been accused of such heinous things. So yes, I think that a lot of this is a distraction. But then there's also the habit that this man has of bullying anyone whom he feels really is somewhat defenseless. Because I think, Charles, you talked about the land grabs. Well, obviously, that's the spirit that lives deep within this nation, yes? Because we had people to come here and steal land from a group of people who lived here. And so we now have someone who feels that he is emboldened enough and has enough power to then go and steal other people's land. It is not for the betterment of those individuals. It is probably to build a golf course, a resort, something to that nature. But this has nothing to do. And I would also venture to say this. It is not my thought process that violence will ever be the cure-all. I don't know when that's ever fixed anything, because all it then does is it gets the wheels moving for there to be what? More violence. So that's why we've never ever seen a time in our lifetimes where there has not been violence, because there's always going to be that get back. Yeah. So, and then what he is now doing is putting us in the line of fire, because he'll be hiding in the basement of the White House, and then there are us here.
Yep. Yeah, and as I was just stating also, in that whole gamut of things that is to come. I look at this and I'm just wondering, like, is it okay to go and kidnap a leader of the country like they did in Venezuela? Okay, this is the first of that, to go and steal oil from Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go and you follow what Israel is leading, because Israel's leading this, so you guys understand. They're the ones that's leading this. Trump is following. He's the one that agreed to have that first shot that killed the Ayatollah. And so just in doing that and trying to gain power to take somebody else out of what they live, their positioning over there in that land, what it says to me is that when you want to be that bully, as you mentioned, and you want to pick on countries that don't have enough firepower to fight back and then say, I'm a strong man, I'm the king, and want to be a king, you got people here in this country such as the Congress, the Senate, the Supreme Court. They're all authorizing this. And the whole reason why, my opinion, is for the authorization is to dehumanize and to actually rid themselves of people of color. That's the way I see it. Because I figure that getting this far into the 21st century, with the gains that we may have, but we still aren't able to complete those things by working together, which would be the real serious issue that they would have, is that they figure that it's better to destroy it than to give the fate of what it's supposed to be. That's the way I see it.
And this is something that's actually been in the works for quite some time, if we really think about it. It takes a lot to get a Supreme Court, all of the Senate, all of the House of Representatives to have the majority in all three. So this is not something that happened within one or two runs or two administrations. This is something that's been the Conservative Party has been focused on for quite some time. Now, what we're starting to see, and I love this, there's a little bit of a shift now. Well, for some Republicans that are now have made it known that they're leaving Congress, they're feeling more vocal. They're holding secretaries accountable for their bad behavior. Example is Kristi Noem. So we're seeing more of that. We're seeing Supreme Court justices say, you know what? These tariffs and the way that you're approaching them is unlawful, unconstitutional, un-American. So we are seeing that there are at least some boundaries that they are willing to set, which is at least somewhat of a sign of some humanity in these people versus just I'm just going to take orders. So I'm seeing a little bit of a shift just based off of what I'm consuming in terms of my news media. By no means is that saying that we're headed in an entirely different direction, but it does at least let me know that there are at least some people who have some morals, some values, some semblance of that to say we can't just let it be a end all be all of whatever this administration tells us to do to the detriment of the entire American population. So seeing that, I appreciate that. When it comes to the approach as it relates to Israel, it does seem that we are locks in step in a way that just it's in my point of view, is entirely uncomfortable. I'm not seeing any rebuking or rebuttal. I'm not even seeing conversations that quite make sense. It is whatever Israel says that they want to do and what they believe is the right way to go. And where is that? Let's have a conversation. Where does this make sense, especially from an American standpoint, right? Common sense here. We're not seeing a lot of that. But then again, call me cynical, but I don't really see a whole lot of that when it comes to this administration and most of the people at the top. Actually, all of the people at the top anyway. So
I 100% agree with that, Jordan. And I think that kind of piggybacking on where you left off with Israel. Now, I'm not as well versed with one in foreign policy or some of these technicalities, but there is this funder, we'll say, called APAC, yeah, and they are something that is more. I don't want to say it's an Israeli situation, but I do believe that is heavily funded through the Jewish faith, I guess we'll say. We know that almost everyone, Democrat, Republican alike, are in the pockets. Because if we remember the election a few years ago where Jamal Bowman from the Bronx and Cori Bush from St. Louis were unseated, it was because they dared to speak out against the atrocities happening in Palestine. And so, and the whole issue was we can't speak out because these are the people that are funding us. And we have always heard that money is the root of all evil. And if anyone thinks they're seeing something good right now, then they are completely and totally blind. Because what we are seeing is money, the money grab, the greed. So kind of in coming to the ending part of what Jordan said, that's where I see it in terms of really the overarching theme of this. But even continuing on, there is a complicity here that is disgusting. And it is not a complicity that is just in the hands of the Republican Party at all. If we're to be honest, we cannot say that. I'm not one who likes to live in the land of excuses. And we hear some of the Democrats consistently saying we don't have the House, we don't have the Senate, we don't have the executive branch. But do you have a mouth? Do you have any wherewithal whatsoever? Because to my mind, there should be more noise. You're sitting idly by on your hands and looking at this happen. Unless they're saying something and somebody forgot to record it, I missed it all. But again, when it comes to this APAC thing, the majority of the Democrat Party are in their pockets. So I think, and I hate to have a level of no optimism, but where my concern is, where is the moral compass? Is there one? You have one group that frames everything a little nicely, but I don't think that they're necessarily standing in too much opposition. I think they sound nice. Their packaging's a little bit put together. And I'll go as far as to say this. What is even more egregious is a lot of the people who are participating look like us. So then I want to know, as we just came out of Black History Month, are you still sitting on the plantation? Did you not know that slavery was abolished in 1863? Did you not know that? Did you not know there was an Emancipation Proclamation signed when you decided you were going to go continue to pick cotton in Massa's cotton field? Because to my mind, you're sitting there as a bunch of do-nothings, allowing these people to run all over you. I expect for people to look like us to do better. I expect for Black men, we're built differently. You know, the people say man up, and I'm not always a fan of the man up because I don't ever necessarily know what that all is about. But in this instance, I want to go in there and I want to say, I want to line up all the Black men, man the hell up. You can't have Jasmine Crockett fighting all of your battles. She what, one little barely 5 foot woman? I'm sorry, I just went off a little bit.
No, I think that's actually excellent. But because one of the issues that I often see in our community, so my lineage is advocacy. My grandparents fought hard for civil rights. They were friends, Dr. King. They were on those front lines. My grandfather had a cross burned in his front yard. That's why he moved our family down to Atlanta, Georgia. But here's the question I typically ask people. If they're going to take you, like if they're going to take you in the middle of the night, are you going to go quietly or not? Meaning that we don't have the majority, but guess what? As my grandmother and other family members would say, baby, if you're going to try to take me, you better come with all of it.
Okay.
With all of it. You can try all you want to, but I'm going to give you that. And for a lot of people, they're so downtrodden, so beaten down, especially the minority community, especially African Americans. I mean, we got to go through our history. We've gone through so much in this country. But again, I'm going to go back to what the members and the women, the proud women in my family, men as well, saying, baby, I'm not going to go in the middle of the night. I see there's a gap and I fight for it. That's why I created a nonprofit, something I thought I'd never do. My background is completely different than the work that I end up doing now. I was in IT for 15 years and I said, guess what? There's something missing for a community that I'm a part of. And I am going to make sure it happens. Here we are 10 years strong, standing 10 toes down. But a lot of people don't have that fight. Now, for some of them, understandably so, there are certain circumstances that have prevented them from feeling like they can. But for others, there's no excuse. If you have the fight, if you have the power, if you have the education, then use it. But let's also not kid ourselves to say there are not some people that look like the three of us who are not talking about, and I'm not going to name any names, but saying such things as we should go back to a time such as Jim Crow and the Black family were stronger. So.
You know, as you say your people say they better bring it. Before I go back to 1955, where I wasn't even born then. But before I go back to that point and past that, believe me, that's not going to happen. But they are definitely trying that, and that's the whole thing. And so when you mention politics, and you mention parties, think about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. First of all, let me make this disclaimer. I'm not Republican nor Democrat. None of those parties get my support like that. You know, I want to see change, and I believe that being the change is what we're trying to do now. Now, you got these folk in this Democratic Party that's sitting there. I mean, they are just sitting there, as David said. They're not doing anything. But what they want is they want to have the opportunity to try to throw out little what they call it, little pieces of bone, or throw a little piece of meat out so you can say, oh, here's a little piece of meat. This is what's going on. But as you mentioned, they are just as much complicit to this as the Republican Party. And I'm sorry to say, but that leader in Congress, the reason why we're not hearing that mouth, and I'm saying this out loud, we're not hearing that mouth is because he is a part of that coalition that you spoke of. That's where his funding comes from, and I'd be damned if he speak out against that war. Because if he did, then believe me, they would have him out of there in the middle of the night, just as you said. They would have him out there in the middle of the night. And so it's not just him, but there are several of those other ones that's doing that, but they are mad as hell because Jasmine Crockett is shouting from the mountaintop and everybody around the world is hearing it. And so they're going to choose to try to find a different way to silence her. And there is none of them pieces of crap up there on Capitol Hill that's got the balls and the wherewithal to actually support this woman because what she's saying is true. And my grandmother always told me, the truth hurts and people don't want to hear the truth all the time. But when they hear so much of that truth, it's like you more than shame the devil because they mad as hell now. They mad as hell. And so now it's like it's an all or nothing thing. And it's like either you're going to do this and we're going to keep these people out, or we'll just burn this bitch down. Plain and simple. See, this is where conversations like this and what we're doing, this is how we start the fire to burn inside the system. Because I can guarantee you, as more people not only watch this and other shows that are doing this, they'll realize one thing: you need to come down from all this little thing that you're talking about. Oh, you made it, and oh, I did this. They should have did this. Been a part of gentrification and destroying our communities for the longest. That's how it happens so quickly and so effectively. It's because they have people that look like they lead the charge. My congressman, I'm not going to say his name, but District 13, which crosses 4 counties here in Metro Atlanta, that actually is a subset of 3 different communities, major communities in Atlanta, led that gentrification. And because of how he was bought to keep that seat, that most of those areas don't even look the same. These people can't even live happily and freely in their communities. They cannot just walk the streets because of folk that they put into these communities and say, this is ours. We got to do something about that.
I think where the struggle comes in with that, though, is I do believe, I was having this conversation the other night. I do believe that when individuals enter into this space of politics, they enter in with really good intentions. I don't believe that they enter in trying to do the game with the get over. But we do know that there are systems in place. And that's not to say that you got to play that game, because again, we saw 2 who did not, and they nicely got unseated. And I would venture to believe they probably want nothing else to do with it because they already know you've got to play the game. And so I think they get in and they are, we'll say, advised. And what is very sad about that is when you are now taking that advice, who are you now harming? And with that, so many people, and this is unfortunate, and I'm just going to say it, so many of us are not informed either politically. And we vote based on color. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that we should not support our people, but I am saying that you might want to listen to what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And not just jump on the emotional bandwagon of I need to see a first. Because I think I might have said it the last time we were on here, all skin folk are not kinfolk.
Kinfolk.
And we know this. We see it because while you talked about the minority leader, I'll talk about Cory Booker, who does the same nonsense.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, he had so much idle time. I saw a video on TikTok that he was busy running around the Capitol with his puppy. The world is on damn fire, and he's running around with his new little puppy. Are we serious? Are we serious? Are you about fighting for the real cause? Well, no, because I got to keep this money over here. And then they get in here and they like to put on those performances in the hearings when the cameras get on, they get the yelling and screaming and going on. Who's buying that? You're not going to get an Emmy or a Golden Globe for that nonsense. Just cut it out because you don't even believe what you're saying. Because if you actually had that level of fight, what we're seeing right now would not be a thing. It just wouldn't. Because you talked about voting rights earlier. Where the hell were you? We can go back further to abortion rights and codify. So we're looking at a reactive bunch of step and fetches.
Now we have gone through a recent litmus test to see and test this theory, because while I do not disagree at all with what you have just shared, David, so again, living in the DC metropolitan area, we have DC, we have Maryland, we have Virginia. Virginia just went through this litmus test because, for those who are not familiar, there is Abigail Spanberger, who is running for governor as a Democrat, and she is more so a moderate. She makes sense in terms of what she even says in terms of policies, given the community and the reflections of the state. Then we have Winsome Sears, who is a Republican, female, identifies as, she's a woman of color. I wouldn't necessarily call her African American. I believe she's actually from the Caribbean. I believe she's from the Caribbean, but she's since been nationalized and has citizenship. And what some of the rhetoric was is, how dare you, as a person of color in Virginia, not vote for Winsome Sears? Now, mind you, if anybody had just listened to Winsome Sears and anything she had to say and had a modicum of intelligence, it would take you less than 5 seconds to make the decision. And it wouldn't be not be for Winsome Sears. For those who don't know, and if you ever need some comic relief, their infamous little meme and short video is I am speaking, I am speaking, I am speaking. Yes, this woman said it 3 times in a row at an event when she was being heckled. And so I go back to, this is a litmus test to some extent to see, hey, are you voting based off of party? We're voting based off of what makes sense? Or are we just voting based off of color? And Winsome Sears, and this was reflected in the polling data and everything collected. By and large, she did not win the people of color vote, which makes sense because Winsome Sears does not make sense as an individual or a politician. So, yes, again, I agree with you, David, but we have gone through a recent, this was this past November that the state of Virginia had this test, and the people came out and they understood the assignment. So we are, some spaces, yes, we're not paying attention the way we should. We vote on color, but other places. Now, what's really unfortunate, and you kind of alluded to this, David, somewhat, and you as well, Charles, it does oftentimes have to do with how in tune and how astute you are. But what I, if nothing else, want to tell people is, this is not about education. This is just about knowing what is best for you. And you can find whatever news that is readily available for you in whatever format so that you can be informed. Because oftentimes people want to say, I'm not political. That's not something I follow. I don't do politics. So it's like, you don't do politics, but politics does you. So you might want to know. You better ask somebody.
You know, I can agree with that in terms of the voting according to color. So I'm just a little north of you. I'm in Maryland with this good Westmore who told that man, don't send those people here because he's on his black man stuff. And guess what? Didn't nobody come in here because that man said, don't send them here. Okay, but anyway, I digress. So we had Larry Hogan, who was Republican, and the second, I want to say his second race, there was this probably is really bad, but I just have to say what I say. We had the former NAACP president, Ben Jealous, who ran against him. I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. It didn't make any sense. It's a bunch of emotional things, ranting and raving. I don't know what you're talking about. There is no policy here. During the debate, it was a whole emotional meltdown. So I totally agree. And clearly here, when it came to that, a lot of voices spoke because there was and the majority of us are that we do vote Democrat. This state is a very Democrat state. It didn't work. So I agree with you, Jordan, in terms of, there some of us are paying attention. But I do want to go back to something else you said earlier, though. When we talk about this political landscape, and you talked about the nonprofit world and being a nonprofit founder, as am I. I have said often that we are the boots on the ground who are going to make the changes.
Yep.
Yes, we live in a political system where there is legislation, but at the end of the day, many of us in the nonprofit world, we are working in maybe smaller sectors. So then we have the ability to affect those things in a lot more of an effective way. And so, and like you, I did not see, my degrees are in music. I'm an opera singer. I did not see myself founding a nonprofit to support LGBTQ youth in foster care. I did not see myself becoming a life coach. Then that's not a nonprofit. Still, I didn't see myself in these spaces, but what I did know was there was a calling to help. I thought about a political run years ago, but then when I was properly schooled, I realized that probably is not going to be for me because I don't do step and fetch it. But I believe very, very wholeheartedly that for those that really want to make change, and I'm not discouraging anyone who wants to run for a political office, but I would ask you to pause and consider maybe some other alternatives, because I really strongly believe that nonprofit work is really, really necessary. It is going to be the thing that shifts the dynamic. It's going to be the thing that changes the climate and the culture. I believe it wholeheartedly, because the thing of it is, those of us who go into this, we are not being bribed to do it by a long shot. We were called to do it. We have a ministry of help. So it doesn't get much more pure than that. And I'm not going to say that everybody who enters into this world is not, doing a get over. I'm not saying that. But I am saying there is a lot more ability to be able to shape some things when you stand in this nonprofit sector.
I think nonprofits, are basically, this may sound kind of strange, but nonprofits to me are like credit unions. And when I say that, that when you go to a credit union is not like these banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, all of these folk that are actually doing fraudulent things and taking people's money and charging you an astronomical amount of fees. Everything has a fee, and they find a way to get over on you, but taking your money and putting your money into situations like this. Credit unions don't do that. Nonprofit organizations don't operate like these, as they call them, Fortune 500 companies, or the majority of these small businesses, where they're out here basically trying to gain favor, being a part of things like this, where nonprofits don't do that. So those that are successful are those that actually follow that rule of law that set the standards and the codes. Those that really reach out into communities and really do their things within communities, they're the ones that people know a whole lot more of. There are some, I will say, that are large, that are really large. When it comes down to it, you can't find, things that would really be in a lot of communities. There's a lot of them that don't show up. I just have to say it. I'm not going to call them out because, again, that's something that I've written on. My thing is this: as a nonprofit, I have nothing but the utmost respect for you guys, because I got to say, when you can operate within those stiff guidelines and you can actually, flourish and grow your organization, that speaks to what that organization is capable of doing and the work and the leadership of that organization. That's what we should be giving credit to. That's what we should be looking for. Those are the people and the organizations that make America what it's supposed to be. Now, when it just comes down to where we are right now, I mean, it's like we're all over the place. But the reason why we're all over the place is that we're trying to cover up for some other things. When I shouldn't say we, but those that be are trying to cover up for other things. And so what we have to do, and I think what our assignment should be, is to not only try to weave through that, but to also at the same time speak up and speak out for what the truth is and why it's the truth. Because some people try to use the status that you guys have in nonprofits, they try to use them for gains in the wrong way. And that's actually happening. And see, that's the thing that scares me more than anything, is because when let's say you guys are doing right, for every 2 of you that's doing right, there's at least 8 that's doing wrong. And so this is not what I think our communities deserve to see or to hear, but what we deserve is the good work that you guys are putting out. Now, when it comes to this government, I'm talking about the federal government. The federal government is not doing its due diligence, but it's taking our money in taxes. So as they're taking our money in taxes, half the crap that they're doing, ain't no way you're going to say you can take my money and do that. But we don't have the authority to tell them what they can and cannot do. But they have the authority to tell us what we will do. Now, how the hell is that right? That's not democracy. And democracy has never been for people that look like us anyway. But we can actually come together as an ethnic group around this whole entire country, in our cities, in our states, in our counties. We can't even come together to form a bond and a coalition to operate and do what's necessary for our people in our communities. How is that right?
I feel it's just a little bit, but by no means cutting you off, Charles, incumbent on me because I know a lot of people are ill-informed about the nonprofit world. And as somebody who came literally from an entirely different field and learned from the ground up, I went to school for it, got certifications in nonprofit administration and leadership. So I built Safe Space Nova. Again, it's been around for about 10 years with $2,500 out of my paycheck. That is where we are. And any nonprofit that's worth its salt in terms of a mission statement and values, you can go to their website and what you will see is what their budget is. Generally, every nonprofit is going to have that posted. And that's where you're going to get a real good indicator. You don't have to be anybody's accountant, mathematician, really look at a budget and say, where's most of your money going? Safe Space Nova has existed because we have not had full-time employees, true story, for the entire time we've existed. I was the executive director for the first 8 years. I did not take a paycheck. I did everything associated with being an executive director and leader of an organization because this was something that was needed within my community. I answered the call. I saw there was a gap and I said, I'm going to do this. So you can look at our website, you can see our financial reports and see, like, we take the money that we get, which is the smallest of donations. Here's $1, here's $5. And we take that and we do that, goes right into our programming and just try to maintain stuff like our website and other materials that we need for our programming, right? So that's what we do. And that's how you know if a nonprofit if it's really worth a grain of salt, so to speak. It's not to say that these bigger, almost corporate-like nonprofits are not necessarily being as helpful, but a lot of times you see them get away from that mission and what the initial work. And what the government tries to do is they say, okay, I can't understand boots on the ground, what is needed in Flint, Michigan, and Arlington, Virginia, and Richmond, Virginia. The list kind of goes on. So what they do is they try to say, but what I can do is carve out some grants. Y'all can apply for that. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky and sticky, because we're all trying to apply for these grants, trying to get this work done. And while the big proposition is we're doing what we can from a federal grant standpoint, we're making these available to you all with a lot of strings attached to them. Yep. Our organization existed primarily on donations, because those strings take away from the work that we can actually do. Because they'll say, and this is the example I love to give. Okay, here's a grant for you in the living room, right? You want to furnish a living room. Everybody knows what it is to furnish a living room, but the grant will say, well, here is money for a coffee table. It's like, but you said it was actually for furnishing a living room, but you said the money can only be used to acquire a coffee table. And they will get you and ding you. You will be in trouble if you spend that money saying, but what about a sofa, a love seat, a TV, all these other things. So we actually, we have foregone that for the most part. We have had some grants, but we typically have not spent a lot of time pursuing grants, because that is the type of strings that come along with them. And we're doing all of that. What's the actual work we need to do? We're spending so much time trying to make sure, okay, we're so specific down to the T of what they're asking us. So I just felt it was incumbent on me as somebody who loves the work of nonprofits and what we do, just to give some background and encourage my people. Please go look at the websites, go look at where they're putting their money. That lets you know, are they really on brand with their mission? Are they headed the right direction? Are they headed the wrong direction, maybe? Because sometimes we get the nonprofits get so large. Why is the nonprofit leader making hundreds of thousands of dollars? Okay. Sometimes. I mean, I'm not calling names, but some of these organizations do exist. So do your homework. That's all I'm saying. Do your homework.
That's very true.
Plan that they got where people say, oh, they're so wonderful. And you got these folks, excuse me for saying this, because what you're saying is true. And I'm trying to get to not saying names of a lot of them. But you get these folk that say, oh, they're the professional athletes and the entertainers. They donate these hundreds of thousands of dollars to these organizations that don't do shit for a community. Now, where's that money going? It's going to what you said, Jordan. They're getting these hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary. It's paying these big salaries for all these people at this organization, where when they, when the government should be enforcing the laws as to how they're using that money, because that's supposed to be public money, they don't. But for the small organizations, the ones like yours and yours, where you guys are putting blood, sweat, and tears in every dollar you got into growing your organization, where they want to make sure they hold the spotlight over you and make sure that all of that is just scanned properly. That does not make sense. But that's the government. That's the government. So let me ask you guys about, I want to talk about that voting rights, because when we talk about voting rights, and we talked about Jasmine Crockett, I'm sure that you guys saw what the Texas Supreme Court did, where they actually disallowed votes after 7 o'clock, which they knew was going to give her that win in the primary. Those were like just dismantled, not counted. Now we're talking about a democracy, right? So Texas is the actual blueprint for the steal of the midterm elections. What they just did is what most likely for all these states to get ready. Because I can tell you, especially here in Georgia, I have never ever, well, there's a couple of times that I've actually voted on election day, but I'm always early voting. I do not have time to stand in a line that's wrapped around 5 blocks. Vote early. And so just to know that those votes are already banked, I'm trying to understand, what is the logic for a lot of people that don't early vote?
Some people, if I had to guess, we still have this older contingency that is very much built on I want to go and cast. So it's about the tactileness of it. I'm physically going and being present in the moment. So for older generations, that's really important. Ones who are not as intertwined with technology as it exists today and the ease of it, going and doing these things and going and pulling the levers, so to speak, that say, I don't need to actually go and be in person or figure this out. Like, they want to go on the day that it is set and say, I cast my ballot. That is what I've seen time and time again with our older adults. A community I'm familiar with because I work with older adults as a social worker prior to becoming a therapist. So they're very much entrenched in that thought of, this is the way I've always done it. And there's a sense of almost pride that's attached to that. And I don't negate that, because at the end of the day, I care about you making sure that you're there on the day that you're supposed to be there. Now, to address your point, when it comes to Texas, I try my best not to be a cynical human being, obviously given the line of work, but in some respects, it's just, I can't help myself. It's Texas. And I was actually, little known fact, although I was raised my entire life in Atlanta, I was actually born in Texas. And I honestly don't like even saying that fact, because I think of it as such a wretched state in terms of how they approach their policies as it relates to LGBTQ folks, as it relates to people of color. I mean, they're anti, so is most of the Bible Belt, but Texas doesn't, it's always kind of like a fist fight between Florida and Texas of who can be the most unscrupulous between the two when it comes to their policies that are anti any vulnerable population. So there's more my cynicism comes in when it comes to Texas. Like, am I surprised? No. Do I think it's right? Absolutely not. Should we ignore this? No. Does it deserve attention? Absolutely. But we also going to just say, Texas as a state and the laws and policies that they, between their governor, between their Supreme Court, I mean, I could write a diatribe about some of the other things that Texas has done most recently that just most people probably have not even risen to the national level, unless you're like really, really paying attention. Some of the things that they've done are just don't make any sense to me when it comes to their policies and legislation. But that's just Texas.
What I would also add to that is, and I don't want to, deal with any mis or disinformation, but I want to say that, and I watch a lot of independent news. I don't watch the corporate news any longer. And it was stated that one of Trump's billionaire donors donated to the gentleman who has now won the Democratic nomination for in Texas. So that goes back to what I said about the party in general and being in someone's pocket. Unfortunately, it comes down to the almighty dollar. That's what it comes down to. Now, it is very interesting that they had to do a whole nother thing in Texas simply because I believe that the whole redistricting thing did not fly there. So then there was going to have to be another trick of the trade in order to get the outcome that they wanted. Because God forbid there be a Black woman to hold that seat. God forbid. One, again, who speaks truth. But this is the other thing I want to say to that. Now, you cannot control systems per se. But, and this happened a lot with Kamala Harris. I don't know why it is okay for our people, particularly Black men, and I think I'm at liberty because it's we all sitting here, Black men, to attack Black women. It's very easy. And even with her, I read some disparaging statements online about her. And when I looked at who said them, unfortunately, they happen to look like us and be of our same gender. I'm not saying that you have to be on board just because, we talked about this earlier, just because of skin or any of this other thing, but there is a thing called respect. And if I'm looking at a whole Black man, I'm sure you had a Black mama. You were not birthed through anybody's white womb. So I don't understand why you're okay to then turn around and attack a Black, you got no Black sister, no way, no Black aunt, no Black grandmama, none of this. It's problematic. But this can go down a whole nother road in terms of patriarchy. We probably don't want to do that today. But I will say it is problematic for me when I see that in particular, the outright disrespect. And that is why that man in DC thought it was all right to disrespect Vice President Harris in the way that he did, because too many that look like us decided we were going to jump on that bandwagon and be just as have your opinion, but know where you need to say it and where you don't need to say it. And I believe that you standing out, you now have given permission to the others. Let me say this. I live in a very red area of Baltimore County. I have now gotten, I want to say, the 4th letter home this year from my son's school. He is in 3rd grade. Where you had these little white boys on the bus calling these black girls monkeys. My son is in elementary school. When do we stand up for our own? When do we do that? And again, and it's starting young. It's starting very young. Because again, like I said, he's in elementary school. We're in a bad way. But I say all that to say, like or dislike her politics, I feel more emboldened or feel it more necessary to state that Black men need to stop allowing for attacks on Black women. As Nene said, I said what I said.
So I think again, I agree. But I have to keep us honest in terms of the atmosphere in which we live. And I like to be very cordial about not mentioning names, but it's very obvious generally when I'm making references. So it took until a certain Black bald-headed senator from a certain southern state did not speak out until an image was released of the former first lady and president as apes. That was the first time he spoke out against. And so we talk about Black men, talk about people that look like us. It took until that image was released for you to finally say anything at all attributed to dissension. So in terms of keeping us honest, that's where we're at as a society, right? So I am a proud Black man when it comes to my community, but everybody who looks like me is not for me. I will
exactly
till the cows come home, and that is one of what are so many different examples, but it's one of recent history, and it will go down as that for a certain bald-headed Black senator from a southern state, right? Cue ball and everything. Until then, no matter how many times he was disrespected himself, it took until that image, even though he was disrespected himself. Look at all this up. You can look it up. It is factual and found very easily through Google or searches on the internet. So that's the time that we live in right now. So keeping us honest in terms of what we're dealing with.
You know, I think just when it comes to a lot of folk, especially people like that senator that you're speaking of, you see, when you run around and just for all the unsavory things that have taken place and for all of the knowledgeable situations to which things are out in the atmosphere as to who you really are, that's the problem. And so when people understand, which they are, most of us already understand that anyway, but I think when people start to understand more about how is it that you get to be 65 years old and you still can't be who you are, that's a problem. Because I'll be damned if I get to be 65 years old and I can't tell nobody, oh, this is me. Because if you don't know who I am, that's a problem. But at the same time, to even speak up and say, oh, well, this is wrong. When he said that was wrong, he got all kind of backlash from them very same folk that he was licking boots from. He was licking their boots. And see, That's the problem. That's the problem, because when you got some people, you got a lot of our men, which I don't know why it's like this, but everything is supposed to be measured on your masculinity. That's not right. That's not proper. That's nonsensical. People are who they are. But because you don't say, oh, this is me, that don't make you a bad person, but it makes you a bad person when you're supposed to be leading your constituents in a particular state that you're not doing it. You're in cahoots with your cohort from that same state. So it don't matter to them, because for them, it's just, I said earlier in the show, it's about that money. So as long as they get that money, they're okay. They can create all kind of fake lives. They can create all kind of fake living abilities and things of that nature. But when you have to go out your way to do all of that, who in the hell is going to trust you? Because there's no authenticity there. I don't even believe that for standing up and saying, oh, well, this was wrong about the Obamas and the monkey thing. I don't even think that was authentic. I think that was something to get a moment to get back into the spotlight and say, well, I was not for that. And you got that same congressman, the one that's been licking boots, that went on that tour to get folk that look like you and I to vote for Donald Trump, which they were successful in getting some, but he too, after getting all this backlash, thinking he was gonna win a primary in Florida and become to run for governor, did he honestly think them folk were gonna vote for his ass? If he thought that, he got another thing coming. Because after listening to what he did to his wife and what he was trying to do to folk in underserved communities, who in the hell is going to vote for somebody like that? I don't care what ethnicity you are, what nationality, gender, whatever you are. When you see the things that this guy has done, there's no way you're going to vote for him. And those that do are definitely uninformed. And see, as they're carrying all these little torches around the country, and they're doing them in tribes. They're doing them in tribes because it's like about 50 of them out there. We got 50 states, but it's like, well, which one do I strike down first? It's so many you don't know. And see, this is where, hey, I'm sorry, but it's probably an analogy that's probably not warranted, but let me tell you, we got to carry this water. We got to carry this water because I'm telling you, it's going to take us to save this world from itself. Plain and simple.
Couldn't agree more.
That's what's going to, huh?
No, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, we have to not just get in the fight, but remain in the fight. And something you said, and this hit me, just like kind of hit me deep. And I had to make a note about it, is for the broader audience that's listening, please don't get distracted by these conversations about masculine versus feminine. I don't like to get baited in conversations about something that's subjective. That has nothing to do, like, talk to me about my manhood and how I show up as a man. And I can tell you what my responsibilities are and how I show up in this world every single day as a man in terms of how I mentor and I work with youth, right? So that's, and there's manhood, there's womanhood. The masculine and feminine stuff, that's just a distractive conversation. We can be talking about that till the cows come home about some subjectiveness. I don't have time for that. Talk about my man and how I'm showing up as a responsible human being, how I do my work, right? How I show up for others and show up for my loved ones. That's the conversation I'm willing to have with you. All the other stuff, you can miss me with that because that's just a distraction. And I don't know about everybody else, but I'm protective of my energy. I'm only going to give where it makes sense, and that just doesn't make sense to me.
Protect your peace.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think that could be a whole nother show. I've had a few conversations on that. I'll leave that alone for today. But I 100% agree that I'm just going to say, Charles, we might need to have a discussion about having that conversation because we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. And can you pick me? because I want to come talk about it. I feel some things about it. But let me back to the bald head one. You do remember that on the campaign trail, that one was the one, but I love you. He did his best slave voice for that one. So you can't expect too much out of that. And then when we think historically, we talk about slave catchers. A lot of those that were used were us. So there's still something ingrained within us. There's still a lack of pride. But then the other piece of it goes to what we are seeing now, the dismantling of education when it comes to Black history. And see, what's the saying? You don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. Mm-hmm. Well, there is an intentionality around keeping our people in the dark about where they have been, because I would be willing to believe if you actually knew, you could not kowtow to this. To me, it would be virtually impossible for you to do that. But that you can stand idly by and look at these people come and remove things from walls, take things out of museums, remove things from curriculum. It's intentional. But again, I have real struggles and real trouble with people who stand idly by. And I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about us, because there's enough of us in these spaces and places to be able to handle it. Mm-hmm. It's enough. Let me say this, and this is why I think I have no tolerance and no time for this weak-minded stuff. Again, I was one of, I don't know, I probably count on two hands how many Black people in my entire middle school. And we were chased by skinheads home with chains. Now, you'd have thought I grew up in Selma, Alabama, 1950 something. I ain't but 46, but you'd have thought that was when I grew up. At 13, I wasn't gonna be able to do it. And I did our first Black History program in my middle school because I was not raised to sit around here and allow the people to, as they kept saying, put their knee on my neck. You can take me out of here before I just do that. But when I say these things, it comes to a point of knowing where you have been. But outside of that, you gotta have some people in your world who model that and teach you that. Because my mother grew up in Baltimore City, and she was a part of the first class of students to integrate what was then Herring Run Middle School in Baltimore City. She talks about riding through white neighborhoods that are now all Black in Baltimore City, and they had to get on that floor because the white people were standing out there chucking bottles and bricks and rocks through the windows at the children. See, when you have parents that have come through that, they built kind of different, and they built us kind of different. So while my tolerance is low to a degree, I can't fuss too much because you only know what you know. Mm-hmm. But for those of us who know better, when you know better, what you got to do better. And I just need for us to get off of the plantation, get out of the cotton field, stop being the wet nurse, and let's do what we need to do for our people. We got to do it. And again, you don't have to agree with everyone's policies, but what you do, you remember that the people would say, I'm sorry, I'm just having these moments. These things with the old Black folk, you didn't just put your business all out in the street. You kept that on the inside there. When you have these issues with the people that look like you, don't get on social media saying that stuff. Talk about it in the house. Keep that in the house. That's family talk. That's not for everybody else. Because see, when you do that, then they're allowed to conquer and divide. Yep. We are in a lot of conquering and dividing right now. Let me mute myself.
Let me, they got a comment here from Tyrone Lewis. He's like, yes, yes, yes.
Tyrone said I'm in line with y'all.
See, but I'm gonna tell you, I honestly believe that as we have these moments, and we've got these things that are just out here right now. I mean, I know it's tough, and sometimes it could be, like I said, it's a little bit over the top, maybe, but I honestly believe that we've got to take an issue and we've got to fight, because, like I said, they got so many of these in these tribes that's all over the country. That is so many that some of them we don't even know about. Okay, because then what they're doing in maybe North Dakota and South Dakota, we don't know what the hell going on over there. One, we don't know what they done got out the mountains, what they done got out the ground and the caves, all that stuff they doing over there. We don't know what they doing, but it's affecting a lot of folk over there. And so, how do we reach those folk? How do we send them the SOS signal? Do we do the smoke signal? let me stop being crazy, but we've got to create groups. And I was just saying this last night in my group. We've got to create groups. And I mean, we've got to be able to actually make this connection around the country. Do as David said, we need to keep it in house. We don't need to put this online or put it out there in the atmosphere for everybody to see it, because this is about us. But we need to create these groups. And in creating these groups, create the agenda. We can do it per region. We can do it per sector. However, it's just an agreement that comes up with the alliance. We need to make these things happen, because I can honestly tell you, there's not one entertainer, there's not one athlete, there's not one business owner. I'm talking about on the top tier level, and they're not top tier because they're not the top 1%, but they're above us. That's only middle class. If you're not in the top 1%, you're middle class or you're poor. We need to make that connection where we're actually we're doing the sense of what's affecting folk, what people are saying, coming up with a plan, developing that plan thoroughly, and executing. We don't have to move with noise. We can move with silence, but we have to stick to the plan. You see, that's one thing that for most people that look like us, especially those that's divided already, they're never coming in. They're never coming in. So that 10%, I've already counted them out. But the other 90%, we can do this. We've got to find the way to actually do this, because I think when we look at the blueprint, as somebody said before, from our past, the Panther Party did it perfectly until they came up with this fake narrative. I'm talking about they was out there just shooting and killing folk when they were protecting and building their community. Mm-hmm. You see, that's when you start to do good things, you become radical. So when you become radical, they have to find the excuse that we've got to make you extinct. And I think that's probably the one thing that has fear in a lot of people. But I'll tell you this, I want to be a part of that. I want to lead that, however it goes. But I'm telling you, we have to do this. And we've got to connect from east to west, north to south. We've got to connect. Because until if we don't come up with that master plan, especially by that midterm election, because I'm telling you, that still is on. And if that still actually takes place, we're done if we are not connected. We have to be connected. So, in talking about education, because education is the other thing that's actually being attacked, and you guys have mentioned some things about education. When you think about the banning of books, when you're thinking about what's happened with DEI. And when you think about Black history itself, you can't teach that anymore. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think my thoughts are you don't have parents in some of these schools with enough wherewithal to fight the good fight. Because in my child's school, it looks like the white lily in the valley. I had a conversation with his principal. Young guy, great guy. We've actually now become friends. Who understood how necessary it was. So you have to have people who are not afraid to buck the system. I think I said earlier, we are living under a system. And I think I used this when I talked about the nonprofit thing. You're not going to be able to necessarily get out of here and make a universal shift, but you can make a shift in your own area. So I think you have to not be afraid to go into your child's school and demand, because see, I think the other thing is parents don't know the power that they have. And there's a certain younger generation of parent who doesn't, because you go into schools and there's a lot of school speak. Now, I taught for some years. My mom's a teacher. My brother's a speech pathologist school. Like, we know the school speak. So I can go in maybe and say some things and put it out in a different kind of way that maybe some other parents don't necessarily feel like they can. And it has nothing to do with education level. It has everything to do with there's so much school speak. You know, there's an acronym for everything when you're talking about a school. And so, but you have to be willing to go. They don't tell you. Do you see that the white folk were the ones who decided that they wanted all the books put out? So why don't the Black folk come in and decide that they're going to counter that? They don't tell you what to do. You allow them to do it. Plain and simple. You've got to be bold. Now, where I have to show a little bit of grace is I do understand that not everybody's equipped to do that. Not everybody knows their rights. Not everyone knows what they can do. And they are intimidated by some of these systems. But a dear friend of mine actually just had me to proof a book of hers where she is talking about parents' rights. Black woman in the Bronx, amazing educator. And she is putting out a guide so that we can understand for ourselves the rights for our children so that we can go into these buildings and make the noise. PTAs are necessary. You can't just say, I'm not going to be fooling with it. Put your Black behind on that PTA. They do what they want to do because you're not in there to fight the fight. Sign up. Show your face. My parents stayed in our schools. They stayed there, even when I didn't want them there. They were there. They had to be. They had their Black boys in these schools. So we have to go in. We have to make noise. That's really that's what you need to do where that is concerned. In my humble opinion, just don't sit idly by.
Limited education makes for easy coercion. It's very simple. The more education I take away from you, and I do it over a period of time. So I can't do it with one generation. But if I start to remove education in terms of books and knowledge, limit your access, then it's easy to coerce you. So let me start with, I can't do anything for those who look like us, who've already acquired the education, right? That knowledge is already instilled in me. But you can do it for elementary kids and middle school kids, maybe even some high school kids. So, I mean, it's not new. It's an old premise that's just been retooled, but it's up for people to kind of recognize that this is happening in terms of our communities and to do something against it. There are ways to rebut the system. And I know and spoken to and engaged with teachers who have found ways to do it. So to stand up, so not just to parents, but teachers as well. I mean, there's something to be said about safety and of course not putting yourself in harm's way, but there's a way to rebut the system. Absolutely. So that you don't end up with not just the next generation, but generations down the road who are having less access, because let's not forget that it's knowledge that has gotten us to the place that we are today, right? That is a great differentiator for people of color, is being able to go and have access to knowledge and have our colleges and universities that are more willing and able to accept us, flaws and all. And the more society restricts us from that, the more we are easily just coerced into believing that whatever is espoused and told to me is good, I'm just willing to accept. I love knowledge. I crave it. So I'm always going to be anti anything that removes or limits my access to knowledge. Point blank, period.
I want to add in one other thing that's a necessary system because it was a part of our history, the Black church. Now, I know people these days are so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. And they don't want to hear about these things. But that was where we got our knowledge. That's where we got it. We found out what was happening in church. That was the place that they didn't want to come bother us in there. We were making too much noise, right? While we were praising our God. And so I sound like Maxine, what is about to get real controversial. For these churches, these pastors get their heads out of their asses and stop with the damn offerings and actually get out here, get from behind them pulpits, out them doors and out your Bentley and serve the people. Have these community meetings need to happen in the church. That's what they used to do. They need to happen in the church. So even if you don't get it in school, there is a responsibility, I believe a firm responsibility for these Black pastors. You don't have to do it on a Sunday in the pulpit. I'm not going to tell you what to preach. I wasn't called to do it. But I will say, maybe one of your weekly meetings, one of those, maybe you could integrate some of that, because I think, Charles, you said we're going to have to look out for our own, but that is the place. That's the only day of the week. That's the most, what did it say, the most segregated day of the week. Is that what the word is? Desegregated? Anyway, but we're all together on Sundays in our church. Those who go. Not everybody's into that, and that's fine too. But I would say that is a major hub where we can gather.
Well, I just put this on the screen with this LinkedIn user says, prior to the 70s, we Black people, then we knew we were behind. Unfortunately, many nowadays think they arrived.
That part.
And see, that's, again, where I say, you may have a few millions of dollars, but you're not the top 1%. So you're not included in the plan of what these folk are doing today. Now, just in talking about this educational part, what I always thought was, I call it more controversial than you can imagine, because some of the things that you hit on, David, I definitely am feeling that. But when I think that, you have targeted attacks, like what's happening now on education, where now, again, like I said, when they're banning books and saying that teachers are teaching kids to be gay, and teachers are teaching the kids to be weak. They're not teaching them the real history, and this book is got to be banned because it's of this connotation. This book has to be banned because it's controversial and it totally contradicts the history of the country. All that kind of crap. Now, true enough, the parents have to show up. I understand that part. But what I'm finding, and from what I understand, most of these parents, is that most of these parents are much younger. They're like way younger than most of us. They're probably like maybe like what? They're in their 30s and they got kids that's 18 and 19 years old or whatever have you. Some of them 40 may have kids like maybe 20 something. I mean, it's like the parents are so much younger, but a lot of them, especially the ones in the underserved and marginalized communities, these are the folk that are actually they have the capabilities of not only being taught, but they can be, and they should be, in what's happening now. These are the folk that need to be talked to help them to understand that they need to be a part of what's happening right now. Because when we started out, what Jordan said, that a lot of people just don't get into it. They say they don't do this when it comes to the politics or learning these other things that's going on. These are the people that we really need to get a hold of, because they are, once that knowledge sinks in, because I'm sure that being taught the right way is an easy thing for a lot of people. It's just that in the education system, there's a lot of teachers that just don't teach. So if they ain't teaching, the kids ain't learning. And so we already know that in a lot of our communities, the schools are already under-resourced, but you got all these folk with these high-priced homes in these communities, but a failing school because they're taking all your tax dollars and they send it to the other side of town and they're featuring all these other folk. That's where the resources going. That's the thing that we got to be able to understand, well, have to teach people to understand. This is what's happening. This is what we need to do about this. This is how we start. That's not going to happen until you actually go out and you meet Mr. and Mrs. America. Because like what we're doing now is totally different, because there's already an understanding and a connotation as to what we're talking about, and just understanding from our opinions as to what we see. But we have to go out to these people physically. We've got to be the politicker now. Go out to these people in the community. But stop acting like we're scared. We can't be scared of our people. We know some people do some things that are unsavory. That's everywhere. But because they're unsavory does not mean that they're unapproachable. You know? Because these other folk, especially in mainstream media, they are quick to post pictures of folk that look like us and say, oh, warning, warning, danger, armed and dangerous, stay away. But it's true. But again, we got to go out, we got to meet these people right there where they are. And once they see and they can trust that you're here under authenticity and no false pretenses, you'll get to learn everything, not just about that community, but everybody that can come into the fold to help in the mission. You know, some people just get too grand. Oh, well, no, I ain't going over there. I ain't going over there. But you know, we have a real situation, and this SOS is real. And I'm just, you know, I don't know. Well, I do have some ideas, and I've been putting this together for a while. And so, just the thing is that I've got to make these connections, because I feel that this is dire. I'm just going to be honest with you. I feel that this is dire. And this is something that must happen. And as I said earlier, it's going to take us to save this country and this world from itself. It's going to take us. Because too many other folk, the mind ain't right. When they're hooked up on that wrong, on that all that crazy stuff, the stuff that don't even make sense, they're hooked on that. And the reason why they're hooked on that is because society said that that was okay. But you see, when you're not a part of that group, that means that there's something special about you. And so I'll always say that the specialty is the specialty. The specialty is people like us that can sit here and we can talk. We can generate some real stir, but we can also make that difference. So it's 7:34. So do you guys want to have any closing remarks before I do this closing monologue?
I will just start by saying I really appreciate having very thoughtful and conscientious conversations. It helps to move the needle as a community. As I love having these types of conversations and being invited into them, and having that around other people who are just comfortable enough sharing and feeling safe enough to do that, because not enough of us do that. So again, I'm extremely appreciative. Thank you, Charles, for inviting me into this conversation. David, you're thoughtful, conscientious additions and everything you discussed. I'm just truly appreciative. So, I mean, outside of that, I encourage for those who maybe want to know more about the work that I do, because I love being an advocate. I love working in the community. That's all about who I am at this point. I left corporate America years and years ago. So you can very easily look me up, Safe Space Nova, Safe Space, and then NOV as in Victor A.org. You can see the work that we're doing. You can donate if you feel compelled. The work I do is in therapy. I created a practice around just supporting LGBTQ folks, affirmative therapy of Northern Virginia. So I do that. And then podcast. I just created a safe space for me and a colleague of mine. We're both therapists, to talk about just conscientiously some of the issues that we see within the community and sharing some of the tools around that. Just want to make sure that we broadcast that and invite people into that space. So thank you again to you both for just having me as a part of this very thoughtful and conscientious conversation.
And I'm going to second a lot of that. And I do appreciate you, Charles. I'm happy to be back on this second time to be able to have this thoughtful conversation. I think it's so necessary for us to have this kind of conversation. As Black men, we have to have we don't always have to agree. That's fine. But we need to have the conversation, because it starts with the conversation. And if we don't ever have the conversation, we have nowhere to go. And somewhere in that conversation, we do find a balance, right? And so we need to do more of this. So I thank you for this platform, and it's wonderful to meet you, Jordan, and to hear your work. That what you said about this nonprofit world, you got to be called to do it, because just like you, I'm still in the thick of it. I'm not 10 years old yet. Am I 5? 2021. My degrees are in music. I just count beats in the measure, and so. I'm still in the thick of that. And what people don't understand is when you are walking and calling, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable. And you're going to be tried. And many times in this whole thing, you're going to think, I got to walk away. Because certainly God has forgotten me, because I'm struggling in this way. And I mean, it was everything I listened to you say, Jordan, I'm still living it. I can see Moret sing a song. I can see the breaking of day. I'm beginning to see the breaking of day, but I could never turn back, because Journey to Josiah supports LGBTQ youth and care. These are children. There is no way that I could walk away from children who need homes, because I don't know everyone's story here. But when you don't have someone to every day just give you a hug and a kiss and say, I love you, have a great day, that does something. Now, Jordan can speak more to that than myself, because again, my degrees are in music. But I do know that it was the nurturing that I got from my parents that made all the difference. And so I needed to continue that fight. So if you feel some initiatives we're doing, because I also say this, when that man became the president, the funding that we had to do greater work was all taken. And again, I couldn't walk away, because at the end of the day, the children still needed something. I still needed to work for them. So if you are so inclined, Journey to Josiah, you can Google my name. You can Google Journey to Josiah. If you're just trying to walk in purpose, there's the purpose room. So if you Google my name, that'll come up. If you want to discuss the space of getting to happy, we're in a space in our lives where I think we take happiness for granted. And we don't necessarily we don't know that happiness is an internal thing, it's not external. So if you're finding yourself in misery, you might want to dig a little deeper within yourselves, because there's nobody else that can make you happy. You know what will do that for you. So I think I'm done with my soapbox. Thank you so much, both of you, so very, very much.
Before I read this closing monologue, let me just tell you guys, I appreciate both of you for being here. You know, it really makes a difference, you know, when there's so much connectivity to the community where we can all make a difference. It's just a matter of strategizing and approaching it in a way that we make it more effective.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this could not happen without guys like you being here, but the work that you all do, that matters so much. And it matters so much because I will tell you that, and again, maybe we'll probably talk a whole lot more in depth off the screen, but I'm going to tell you that the work that you all do, as I said earlier, this is important because you can't do this within those confines that you guys have to operate in and still maintain. If you still maintain, then that means that you're doing what you need to be doing. And that's where you're supposed to be, because nonprofits are like straight line. And you know that if you outside them regulations, you know them folk coming at you. But you know, you guys are doing really, really good work. And this is again one of the things that I want to make sure that is just highlighted when we have this conversation, because it's all about building our communities. So in closing this Final Word Friday, tonight's conversation reminded us of something Fannie Lou Hamer knew all too well. Freedom is not guaranteed. It is earned, protected, and defended every day by everyday people. We're living in a moment where war tests our leadership, education tests our values, and voting rights test our democracy. But we are also living in a moment where truth still matters, where community still matters, and where our voices still matter. So as we close tonight, remember this: democracy is not something done to us, it is something done by us. And when we show up, speak up, and stand up, we honor the legacy of those who fought before us and pave the way for those who will come after. I'm your host, Charles Zachary King. This is Final Word Friday, and the final word is simple: stay informed, stay engaged, and stay powerful. Thank you guys. Have a great evening. We will see you all next week for another slew of great shows. Have a good evening.